So we were talking about the wind literature course, and I found it so easy to put together my curriculum for last semester, the music of what's happening now. And each semester that goes on, it's a value system and it's a philosophy of mine. And I speak this openly and often to my own students that there will be representation in every single thing that I do. It'll just be a consistent small part of every single thing so that it becomes more embedded and it's less of something that we have to try to do. It's just part of who we are.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jake Walker and Colin Peters for their contributions to the show, and especially to all of you who are listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Tonya Mitchell-Spradlin. Hi, Tonya.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. It's my pleasure to have you on. I'm really excited to meet you and to hear your story. Before we begin, can you introduce yourself for the listeners?
Sure. My name is Tonya Mitchell-Spradlin. I teach at Penn State University as the director of concert bands. Actually, this is my first year going into the second semester here at Penn State.
So you started in August.
I did. I started in August.
Oh,
we
wow.
moved here in May 23rd. So we did a pandemic move.
Yeah, that's not great.
No. There's a lot of hand sanitizer.
Yeah, I bet. So how was it to start in the middle of a pandemic as opposed to, day one with students in the room and rehearsals? I mean, has that been difficult?
Yes, I think transitioning to any job is difficult, and particularly in a pandemic. So I spent all summer meeting people, meeting faculty. I had an individual meeting with every single member of our winds, brass, percussion faculty, and also all of the other conductors, orchestra, and choir, just to get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
So that when I needed something from them, it wasn't the first time that I was asking. They'd already got to know me a little bit.
Right.
And we spent the entire time just figuring out how to do things the safest way, sitting in a lot of meetings, keeping up with all the research that was coming out, kind of focusing on what is our mission and what's our purpose and what we can provide to students that would be as safe as possible, and then how to build a connection with them behind a mask and distancing and a lot of virtual instruction.
Can you tell everyone how you got into music? What's your origin story?
So my origin story, I started playing the piano when I was around 7 years old. My mom got me one of those little 66 key Casio light up keys. Like when the key lights up, you press it and it plays a song for you. And so I learned how to use that. And after a while, she put me in piano lessons. And I started taking piano lessons with a woman named Valencia Giles. She's had a huge impact on my life. Then I started playing in band. I had an older brother who played the trumpet, and he was 2 years older than me. So when he was in the 8th grade, he was in middle school band when I was joining in 6th grade, and said, Tonya, I play the trumpet, so you can't play a brass instrument. You have to play a woodwind instrument. And I can't believe I listened. And I played the clarinet. And I loved playing my instrument. And I realized pretty quickly that I wanted to be a band director. I just loved it. And I loved playing with other people. And I decided then I'm going to be a band director. And everything I did from then on kind of validated and supported that. I started getting different instruments. And so I got a trombone in the 8th grade. And my band director said, if you can make all state on the trombone this year, then I'll throw you a party at the end of the year. And so I'd come in every morning, I'd practice trombone for an hour or so before classes started. And I made all state on trombone. But he did not throw me a party. I still remember that.
Well, you should send him an email.
I should. Can I get that party now? It's been a couple decades. And I just kept playing and took a lot of different opportunities. And I played in a youth orchestra. My brothers were in band as well. My older brother kept playing trumpet. My little brother joined band and he played the French horn. My mom played in an African drumming ensemble called Drum Cafe just outside of Atlanta. We grew up in Lawrenceville, Georgia, which is about 20 minutes north of Atlanta for those who know that area. And so after that, I left the Georgia area, the Atlanta area, and I went to school at Indiana University. And I'd always wanted to be a band director, so I only applied to music schools, and I got into IU, and I was really happy about it. It was my first choice, and I had an amazing experience there.
So, the first thing you said that really kind of sticks with me is that you started with a Casio electric keyboard, and that led to piano lessons. When my parents got me my Casio electric keyboard, I messed with it for a little bit, and then it started to collect dust. And so I'm really intrigued by what was inside of you at that point when you were on that piano or on that keyboard that led to then continuing.
Oh, I don't know. I did come from a artistic family. So my mom is an artist, full-time artist, and actually spent a lot of time in the military. So it was really interesting, artistic / very strict upbringing. But we all played in a samba band when we were really young as well.
Oh, wow.
And there's always music in the house. And my father passed away when I was very, very young in the military. And so I suspect that she played music in the house, 1, because it was soothing, 2, because it kept us moving, and 3, because it helped get us out of bed early in the mornings on the weekends so we could do our chores. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure why I got the Casio and just kept playing. It's music was always a part of our house, so it seemed natural.
Tell me a little bit more about this teacher. She sounds amazing to kind of keep you for that long.
Yes, I started when I was 9, consistently took once a week. She lived near my middle school. And so I was able to sometimes walk from middle school to her house. And then she moved and I ended up having to drive, of course. But weekly lessons all the way through middle school, all the way through high school, and kept in touch with her through college and would go home and take some lessons with her then too.
That's really cool. Yeah. So do you have anything from her that you still use in your teaching? Any ideas that came from your lessons with her?
I think what she was really good at is finding her students' individual strengths. She was not the kind of teacher that would admonish me if I told her that I didn't want to practice a certain thing if I was practicing something else. She also really encouraged improvisation and arranging and composition. So if there's a lesson that I went to where I didn't particularly practice from the book what I was supposed to be practicing, if I was working on something creative, then she would encourage that as well. She also taught me kind of a rule of practice that I continued using on my clarinet. It's the penny rule that a lot of people use. If you practice and get it accurate 10 times in a row, then you can move on. And so I take this penny from the left side of the piano and move it to the right side of the piano when I played the particular segment or passage accurately. And then if I did it the second time, I'd move the penny over. And the third time, I'd move the penny over. But if I got to 9 pennies on one side and then messed up, I'd move them all back and start all over again.
And then there's, of course, this trombone story, which is absolutely remarkable. So now, was clarinet your major instrument in college?
Yes, it was. But I also played trombone in marching band for 1 year and tenor sax for another year.
I, wow. Okay. I could see the saxophone that works.
Well, my clarinet teacher didn't want me playing the trombone anymore, but I still wanted to be part of the low brass section, and tenor sax was part of that section. So I found my way around it.
So the other thing you mentioned is that your family is really musical and music was around. And you said your mom was in an African drumming ensemble. Both your brothers played brass instruments, trumpet and horn. Do they still play? Do they still make music?
Oh, no. No. My older brother works in finance, and you'll never find anyone more passionate about making a spreadsheet. And my little brother he is an artist. He went to school for 3D animation.
Oh, that's cool. Does he do like
Yeah,
video graphic design and things like that, or videos?
he does. Yes, he does.
So now you went to the Jacobs School at Indiana, and you mentioned a little bit about that experience playing in the marching band, and what was that like though for you? I mean, that's such a big school with such a high level and so cosmopolitan, and I'm just kind of curious to see how you feel about what you took from that experience.
Yeah, it was a big school. I had excellent experiences, met my best friends there. And actually, I met my mentor, kind of like a lifelong mentor, Paul Popeil. He was my freshman first ever conducting teacher. And so Indiana University has a minor in conducting for undergrads, where you just take a couple of extra classes and a wind literature course. And Paul Popeil was my conducting teacher. And he said something I think it might be one of the reasons why I stuck with it. And I found that I started doing a little bit more research and getting into kind of the art of conducting more, in addition to playing my instrument. And I think he said something like the force is strong in you, young one. Like a Star Wars quote. And that stuck with me. And I loved his demeanor and found him to be a wonderful teacher and educator and mentor. And he stayed in my life, and he's the reason why I went eventually and got my DMA in wind conducting at the University of Kansas, was to study with him.
So, Tonya, while you were at Indiana, you mentioned Paul. What else sort of sticks out to you from your time there? And then can you explain to me what you did next? Did you go right into teaching after that?
I did. So what I loved about being at IU was it was a big school. It's a huge school. I think there were 60 clarinet players there in the 3 studios and 20 or 21 in my studio. But I loved every second of my time there. If I could go back, I'd probably practice more.
Wouldn't we all?
But right? Indiana has a program where you can student teach in a variety of different settings. So you can student teach overseas, you can student teach in what they call the Cultural Immersion Project. At least that's what it was called when I was there, and student teach in inner city Chicago, inner city schools, or you could student teach on the Navajo Reservation.
Oh, wow.
And so I student taught on the Navajo Reservation. And for a couple of weeks, I taught 3rd grade, and I needed to teach at the government school because I was living in the government housing. It was a boarding school for students. And so I lived in that boarding school, except they went home on the weekends and I stayed. And then after 2 weeks teaching 3rd grade, I started teaching band, middle school band. I also taught choir, coached track, and I taught piano and I taught guitar. And guitar was interesting because I had to learn to play guitar so I could stay kind of one level ahead of the students. And I loved that experience, every second about it. I completely had to change my way of thinking in terms of timing. When I was at Indiana and all my life beforehand, growing up in Georgia, everything's so time-based. Like we're rushing through everything. I have 30 minutes to do this, and then I need to drive to my lesson, and then I need to get to rehearsal, and then I need to go to class, and classes start at 7:10 in the morning, and everything is just so back to back to back. It's fast. It's a fast-paced life. And I would say that is the case for musicians and the case for just Americans in general. But there it was a little bit slower pace. And I've had the hardest time. I had the hardest time with that at first because I thought I needed to be moving constantly. And that experience taught me to just relax and take things as it comes and enjoy the beauty of every situation. The most gorgeous landscape, the most beautiful sunsets I think, are in Kayenta, Arizona. And I haven't seen anything that has matched it since. But I could not find a job teaching high school. I wanted to teach high school. I couldn't find a job teaching high school. I actually couldn't find one teaching middle school, only elementary school. And so I came back. I almost want to say came back to the States, even though I was just in Arizona. It felt like a completely different life. And from there, I left and I did find a teaching job in Georgia. It was actually interesting because I was the last of my friends to get a job. And so I would I would travel around with a suit in my car and just in case. And I remember driving home from Indiana in the summer to visit my mom in Georgia. And I had the car running and I went inside to say bye. And as I was going back out to my car, I got a phone call. And the phone call was from Chamblee High School. And they asked if I wanted to come in for an interview the very next day. And I thought, yes, I would love to come in. And I thought to myself, I have a suit in my car, so I'm ready. And so I went to this job interview and I got this job, which was 3 days before band camp started. So that's how late in the summer it was.
And so we're going to come and we're going to talk about Chamblee, but I want to go back to the Navajo Reservation. I was going to ask you if it was in Arizona and you said, yeah. So you confirmed that, but I don't know. That just seems like such a remarkable experience. I didn't know that Indiana did that.
Yeah, well, Indiana does such a good job. I felt like the music school did a great job of putting students in schools for various experiences. You know, I taught as a woodwind tech for camps, and I'd done lessons and group lessons and things of that nature, and had observed at a number of schools. And so I wanted something different. I wanted to know some things I didn't know and figure out, what's life like somewhere else and what's music like somewhere else. What's the music education scene like there? And it's an early decision you have to make because it adds a little bit extra to the degree. It's a couple of extra classes so you don't go out there and look stupid.
Yeah, sure. Oh, believe me, I completely understand that. When I took my current job it's a Jewish community school, it's like I've had to learn Judaism on the fly. It's like, oh gosh, how many times can I stick my foot in my mouth? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's different than knowing about Judaism than actually like being in a school where that's the culture. It's just different. And so I guess that's what I want to ask you. What was the music education like on the reservation in that school?
In some of the bigger schools, there were band programs. There were actually a couple of marching bands. There's a marching band at the high school across the street where I was, but they didn't need a student teacher. So I didn't spend the bulk of my time there. I just went over there a little bit here and there. But I found that, at least in the place where I was, several years ago, there was a grant to bring instruments, and then it kind of fizzled out. And so our biggest challenges there were not everyone had instruments and not everyone had enough chairs. Like there were literally not enough chairs for the students to sit on. And then of course there weren't enough stands. And so in the location where I was in, and I was in what I would call kind of a ritzy area on the Navajo Reservation because there were paved streets and we had street lamps and street signs. There was a movie theater. And that's just was not the case everywhere. So I would say a little bit of a scarcity of resources and really needing excellent teachers to go to bat and advocate so that students can play and perform. And no shortage of students who wanted to play and perform, though.
All right. So then you mentioned that you got the job at Chamblee. Is it Chamblee or Chamblee?
It's Chamblee, like champagne.
I thought it might be. And Chamblee's where exactly? I think I've heard of it, but where exactly is it in Georgia?
Chamblee is just outside of Atlanta. It shares a zip code.
Oh, okay. And so what was that like? You said you came in at the end of band camp, and did you have any assistant directors? Were you the whole program? I mean, walk me through that.
I came in just before band camp started. It was maybe 3 days until we started camp. And the previous director didn't select a show for marching band, knowing that a new director would be coming in. I did have an assistant. There was a history of the school. The social studies, one of the social studies teachers and baseball coach actually marched in college, marched at the University of Georgia, was in the Redcoat Band, and just always loved marching band. And so worked as the assistant for the marching band in the fall, and then coached baseball in the spring. And he was fantastic. He was just wonderful. Yeah, I feel like that situation could go either way, but it was a really positive situation. So when I came in, I found a show, and I reached out to all my resources, and I said, "Can you help me?" And Scott Jones, who was working on a doctorate at IU when I was an undergrad, was teaching as one of the assistant directors at the University of Georgia. And so I reached out to him and I said, "Scott, I need some staff. I need people to come in and help me with camp who can teach sectionals and who can do some fundamental training and who can just help me not be alone, but also not cost very much money at all." And so he recommended a number of really excellent people who were fantastic, and I kept using them year after year after year after year. So it was a really positive situation. I think I came in at a great time for those students. We talked openly about being vulnerable and being new, and about establishing a vision together and working together. And first year of teaching is very, very hard, but I think I had good support from parents. And for the most part, I think the students were willing to kind of go on a journey with me.
Mm-hmm. So now I have to ask the question that all the young band directors listening want to know. What kind of mistakes did you make?
Oh my gosh.
Or let's call them learning lessons.
Oh, well, one is making sure that when students go on a lunch break, they don't wander off and wind up at the Arby's down the road. I remember having to drive back to get something from the school because our rehearsals were at a different location, not too far away from where our high school was, but we didn't have a field to practice at that actual high school. So we practiced at another school down the road, and I drove back to school to get something, and I saw one of the students walking on the side of the road. And I thought, "Hey, what are you doing? You should be here." And I contacted his parents, and I got to tell you, his parents came to visit at South Carolina when I taught there. They came to a game. We went to lunch. I see them every time I go back to Atlanta. They're wonderful people. So that's a success story of contacting a parent for a immediately kind of negative reason. I have a major programming mistake that I made. So you asked what advice or what mistakes did I make to help out these new teachers. You leave school and you have this list of these pieces to be amazing. And one of those pieces I had in my list was Scenes from the Louvre by Norman Dello-Joio. Mm-hmm. And I loved this piece, and I had 3 trumpets, and each of those 3 trumpets could play an A above the staff, concert A, their B. And I thought, oh, well, they can play that note. So we're going to be able to play the last movement, the finale of Scenes from the Louvre, the part where the trumpets go deep, ba 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 bum bum ba 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 bum bum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum. They play up an octave. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was horrible. And it was just way too much pressure and strain on these players. And I remember having guests come in that year, and one of the guests came in and said, "I know you have evaluation in a few weeks, but this piece is too hard and you shouldn't have programmed it, and it's not going to go very well." Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do now? It's like, do better next time.
Yeah, overprogramming's a thing.
Oh, yeah. So that was a big lesson learned my first year teaching.
Yeah, do you have any advice for a young teacher who's trying to pick the right literature their first year or two? Because, there's a tendency to either overprogram or severely underprogram.
Yeah, there's a first get to know the students, get to know every single thing about them and their ins and outs. As you do warm ups with the ensemble, maybe not do the exact same warm up every single day, but do different things that relate to the music. Get used to how they respond in difficult circumstances or respond, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of off the cuff if you change something. Um, think about the piece. It might be a wonderful piece, but maybe not the right fit at the time. So, some things to take into consideration are timing. I mean, how much time do you have to put the piece together? How long are those rehearsals? The rule that I was told when I was younger is that if students can play from beginning to end of the piece fairly well without having to stop or any major disasters, then you're going to be able to give a meaningful and moving rendition of your performance or interpretation of the piece because the students aren't stumbling in the initial reading process. I think that my study for that piece that I chose for Scenes from the Louvre, I think my study was fine, but I picked the right piece for the wrong reasons, or the right piece maybe at the wrong time. And so I would say also, if I could do that situation again, just because students can play something once or twice, and just because they really love it, doesn't mean that it's the best fit for them at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, picking literature is a big part of the job, finding the right music.
Oh yes, definitely. And I think as a first year teacher too, I had limited resources. I wanted to use what we had in our library.
Mm-hmm.
My whole programming philosophy is a lot different now than it was then. And then of course I've had a little bit of time to get a little bit better at it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So, while you were in Chamblee, while you were at Chamblee, did you sort of have any mentors? I know the Atlanta area is, it's huge and there's so many wonderful band directors and music teachers in that region. Did you have any particular mentors while you were there?
I did. My first couple years of teaching, I would sit in rehearsals at Lassiter High School, which is
Mr.
Cobb
Watkins.
County, yeah, and it wasn't too far away from where I taught. And he was helpful in that he'd come do a couple of rehearsals with my group and he'd listen to recordings and give me feedback. And then I ended up playing in the Cobb Wind Symphony. So we worked a lot together there. And I fell in love with the philosophy and just the persona of Myra Roden.
Oh, yes.
And I'd only been teaching for a couple of years, and I just wanted to meet her, and I wanted to have her in my life, and I wanted to be able to ask her questions. And I was so nervous. And I sent her an email, I think, just out of the blue, we did not know each other. And I said, "Oh, I really admire you, something. I would love to meet you at Midwest if you ever have time." And I saw her at Midwest and I thought, "Oh my God, it's Myra Roden." And I went to her and I said, "Hi, I'm Tonya and I'm sending you the email and, I would love to." And we have had an amazing relationship since then. I've worked with her Athena Music and Leadership Camp, and we worked together in the Association of Black Women Band Directors, which was started this past summer from just a Zoom meeting in the pandemic. So those two were very influential.
So you mentioned now, so I don't screw it up, what is the official name of the organization that started this summer? The association?
It is the Association of Black Women Band Directors, which first started from Myra sending me a text that said, along with Zandra Bell McCroy, that said, "Hey, do you want to do just a get together and just kind of hang out with and talk to other Black women band directors?" And we said, sure. And it was just this low key kind of hangout, networking, fellowship. And as the summer progressed, we thought, well, this needs to be more official and we'd love to have more outreach. And, We spent the summer watching protests and violence, and everyone's asking these questions. How do we make diversity and inclusion more of a part of what we do so that we can every day make small strides to build inclusivity and fight systematic bias and racism? And one of the ways to do that was, making this organization, this hangout, an organization, an association, making it a little bit more official so we'd have a little bit more reach, and then kind of enacting our own vision of outreach and support and helping to kind of change our history.
Yeah, no doubt. I think in some ways, by putting a title to it and creating the association, it sort of validates it, and it sort of enhances the representation for younger women who might be interested in, a career in conducting or a career in music education.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we've done a lot of talking about representation over the course of the history of the podcast. And I know that women in band directing have faced many challenges. Do you want to talk to any of the challenges you faced as a Black woman, as a band director, or would you prefer to avoid it?
Oh, I'm happy to talk about it. Sure. So I grew up in a very diverse area in the suburb of Atlanta. So I didn't really think too much about representation in my field. And because I was never the only one in a room, I was never the only Black woman in a room or the only Black kid in the class. And then I went to IU and I was the only Black kid in the class, the only Black female or person of color at all that I remember in my graduating class or my entering class in music ed. But I had a great experience there, and I had a great network and wonderful teachers. It didn't faze me too much until I started going to conferences when I started teaching college. So even when I taught high school, I taught in DeKalb County, and there were 2 other Black female high school band directors. So there are 3 of us in the same county. That's kind of a big deal. And I didn't realize how rare that was. And then I started teaching college, or I went to work on my doctorate. And that's when it became, very, very evident. I think I was the only Black person in the state of Kansas is what it felt like sometimes. And not to say I didn't have a great experience. I loved my time there. I met my husband there. You just notice it when you're the only one in the room. I remember teaching high school and someone wanted to compliment the marching band. And they went to the assistant director, who was a white male, and they said, "Hey, your band sounds really great. I just wanted to let you know." And he said, "Oh, well, thanks, but I'm actually not the band director. She's the band director." And he pointed to me, and the guy was like, "Who?" And he said, "She's the band director. She's standing right there." And he says, "No, stop pulling my leg." And then he went to students and said, "Hey, who's your band director?" And they all pointed, "Oh, it's her over there, Miss Mitchell." And he still didn't believe them. Then he went to like boosters and chaperones. "Hey, who's the band director?" Everyone keeps, giving me the runaround. Like, how many different people have to validate that I exist in this space? Another time too, I was doing an honor band not too long ago in Georgia, in Warner Robins, Georgia, and it was a wonderful honor band. The students played very well, and they had great personalities. And sometimes you do honor bands and it's phenomenal players. And sometimes you do honor bands and they're phenomenal human beings and maybe not the best players. But I felt like this was a nice mix of the two. And a flute player on the front row said, "Can I ask you something, Dr. Mitchell?" By then I was doctor. And I said, "Sure. Yeah. What do you need? What do you want?" And she said, "You're saying a lot of things that are making us better. And we sound good. But you just don't look like a band director."
Oh.
Yeah. And I know she didn't mean it to be rude. And I know she wasn't trying to be offensive. I actually appreciated that she was kind of fighting this own cognitive dissonance in her own brain.
Sure.
Like, hey, I'm in band. And hey, I'm hearing words that are helping me to be better. And I'm shaping my phrases and the ensemble sounds good. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the person who's delivering this instruction. And that was a crazy moment. And we talked about it a little bit. And I said, well, what does a band director look like? And I said, what should a band director look like? You could be a band director if you wanted to. And she goes, yeah, I guess I could. And I liked the end result of that.
Boy, there's a lot in that.
Sure. And, now I'm trying to ask the questions of, there are definitely young girls in music programs, and there are definitely people of color, and they're playing in middle school, they're playing in high school. And then, what happens through college, and why are there so few teaching high school or teaching college or getting those degrees? So that's kind of my area of focus now, and something I want to put more energy into helping to rectify and to make that a little bit better.
Absolutely. I mean, you kind of have intersectional hurdles here, right? You have the hurdle of being a woman, and you have the hurdle of being a Black woman. And it seems like, that just seems like a lot for a kid.
Yeah. I mean, when you really think about it and you dive into it, it is a lot. But, every day we show up and we make music, and it's beautiful now that we're talking more about it and validating that feeling a little bit more, and more people are talking about, okay, well, how do we make this change? And, a big part of that is just, representation is advocacy. And we know that when you don't see yourself represented, even if you have the skills to do it, you don't naturally lean towards doing this thing you don't see yourself represented in. And, that's the case with the more female conductors we get, the more young girls will want to be female conductors. The more Black female conductors we have, the more young Black girls will want to be conductors. And I think that cycle will improve as representation increases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it, because I agree with you. Well, thanks for talking about this stuff, Tonya. I know it's not your responsibility. Sure. So I always appreciate it. And I always, I treat it with respect, and, so.
Certainly. I used to hate talking about it just a few years ago, but now I really don't mind. And I really do think that, talking about things is what brings awareness, and that's how the needle is moved. So
I agree.
To talk about it.
I agree, but I also do understand that it's not your responsibility. So
Sure. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. So that was good. I guess we should go on to your next sort of your move. So you were at Chamblee, and then I know you went and you have a master's from Georgia and a doctorate from Kansas. I want to get to the present quickly. So can you kind of run me through that just briefly?
Sure. So I am director of concert bands. Official title is director of wind band studies at Penn State University in State College, Pennsylvania. And it's a really big school, over 40,000 students, but a fairly small and kind of intimate music school with only about 300 students, which is just kind of nice. Everyone knows everyone, and you get to know the names of every single student and kind of follow them. I have a small conducting studio with 2 master's students. Right now it's 1, but we are about to add our second one with some auditions coming up. And we actually only have master's students. The only DMA program here at Penn State right now is in piano, and we have a PhD, but every studio has master's only. I also am excited that I get to teach a wind lit class to grad students, and conducting to undergrads here at Penn State, in addition to conducting the wind ensemble.
So prior to Penn State, you were at the University of South Carolina. You were involved with the athletic bands, or all the bands?
I was the assistant director of bands at the University of South Carolina. So I conducted our third band, the university band, and I also worked with all of the athletic bands. I did the women's basketball band, which was actually the last band experience that I had at South Carolina before the pandemic. The basketball band went to the women's SEC tournament. We won the tournament, and then I never saw those students again, which is I'm kind of sore about it because I missed them, and it was a weird way to leave. We didn't get to say goodbye.
Yeah, everything about last spring was weird.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm really curious about the the wind band literature course, because we talked a little bit earlier about picking music. So what does that look like? What does your class look like?
Oh, excellent question. So the wind literature course, the way it's structured here is it happens over the course of 4 semesters, and there's a different topic every semester, with the intent of giving students who enroll in the class kind of a deep overview of the history of the wind band and what's happening now, original works for wind band, transcriptions. What I did when I got here is I took the structure of the 4-year model and I saw that nobody was returning. And I worked with Dennis Glocke, and Dennis Glocke was he's my predecessor, and he was here for 26 years. And so he's just been a wealth of knowledge and a wonderful resource. And I asked him every question you can possibly ask someone. And so in structuring this class, I wanted to focus on current events. I wanted to focus on culturally relevant events and culturally relevant music. I wanted to talk openly about diversity. I wanted to talk about difficult concepts and how they were represented in our wind band medium, and kind of how our medium has grown and changed in the past 20 years. And so I chose to start our 4-semester cycle with music of now. What is happening right now? What's shaping our field literally right now? And what led to that in the past couple of decades? And so that was last semester. It was a phenomenal semester, excellent grad students. We covered the music of Omar Thomas. We covered Beolo's Last Breaths, the piece written about young Black men killed by police. We covered Roshan Etazadi, Jennifer Jolly, Carter Pan is in our list as well. And so there are 22 composers and 22 pieces on that list of music from roughly 2000 to now. And so we've gone a little bit further back in history for this current semester, which is about 1970 to now.
So what was the decision to teach it kind of in that? I mean, I know you said that you wanted to address the topics because they were of urgency, but what was the decision then to kind of keep going chronologically backwards rather than, say, jumping back to, I don't know, Patrick Gilmore?
Yeah, sure. Well, I figured if I need to start from the beginning and move up, or start from where we are now and go backwards. And so the reason the class is 4 semesters is because whoever's a grad student in the wind conducting studio, they take all 4 semesters. So it's different for them every time. And so I wanted the grad student to have a reverse chronological education. I didn't want to skip around. So I figured, if I start where we are now, I want it to be smooth so she can kind of piece together our lineage, our chronology, instead of jumping around. And one thing that was really important to me too, as I teach this wind literature course, is there's so much exceptional music in our core repertoire. And a lot of this class focuses on why is that music there? Why is it quality? Who decided it was quality? Do you think it's quality? What's your definition of quality? How do you apply that definition to other pieces? How do you discern, if you think a piece is worth putting on your program now? And there's so much new music now, and it's easy to access music and composers because, well, the internet. And so I wanted to start with this skill of being able to discern for oneself what would lead to a program of integrity, and then build upon that with curated pieces that I do feel fall on that list.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really would like to take a course like that. I don't have any conducting degrees. I never had any sort of wind literature courses, as a composer in the field and as someone who's been around it for a long time. I know of the music, but I've never really actually formally put it together in sort of any meaningful way.
Right. Well, like you mentioned before, I'd be happy to share, And I'm excited too. And, there's a lot of, I have the perspective of being a woman and a Black woman, but this will be I'm looking forward to putting together, a series of courses that examines all composers of Latinx composers and LGBTQ plus. And, I must plug this book that I just got from GIA Publications, The Horizon Leans Forward. And it is by Eric Leung, and it has stories about racism and the Black experience in America, the intersection of Asian culture and a career in music, experiences and insights of esteemed female directors, and an annotated list of hundreds of pieces by people of color and women and people who identify as members of the LGBTQ plus community. And it's phenomenal. I can't wait to read more of it. I've only read a couple of chapters, but I thought that I would make sure, since we're talking about programming and having sometimes what's difficult conversations in schools, this is a great resource.
All right, Tonya, I want to ask you a little bit about, since conducting is your thing and you do teach a lot of conducting, and that's obviously your strength. Do you have any advice for young directors as far as conducting? And it's hard to do in an audio format, obviously, when you can't show anything, but thoughts maybe or ideas that you can share?
Sure. In terms of, just physically, stand up tall and keep your palm flat. We'll fix a lot of things.
Uh-huh.
And then psychologically, just don't be afraid to be yourself. Be vulnerable. I think there's trying hard to be perfect or to be liked by all the players kind of creates this noise in your head that makes it difficult to connect with the music. And I think if you do that, then the former will happen. You will find that, you have a more genuine connection with players, and they're able to give a little bit more. So be vulnerable, and also be where you are now. There's no rush. Don't try to be the next so-and-so. Just try to be a little bit better than you were the day before. And one part of that is, having a vision. And when I say vision, I mean something more open-ended. Like, for me, my vision was always, I want to inspire young people. And I really want to work with students who eventually will make it their life mission to inspire other young people. So I love teaching music ed majors. I really like working at Penn State because there's primarily undergrads who play in the wind ensemble, the few master's students, and many of the students here are music ed majors. And I like that. I like that kind of student. I really like working with music ed majors. I like working with those who want to teach again, who want to teach later. And so my vision was always, I want to inspire young people, and I want to make, I want to make meaningful musical connections wherever I am. It wasn't, I want to be a director of bands at 5 years. I'm going to put in 3 years here, and I'm going to put 3 years there. I mean, it kind of worked out that way, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to teach college until I went to grad school. It's not like it was necessarily part of the plan. I think I could have maybe taught high school for quite some time. So, be in the moment, make your vision something that you can derive pleasure from every day, as opposed to, waiting 10 years until it's enacted. And I can't stress enough, again, just be vulnerable and authentically yourself.
Yeah, that resonates pretty deeply with my experience and throughout my career. Couple things you said there. One is be a little bit better every day. That reminds me of your penny philosophy, your penny trick.
Oh yeah.
Being a little bit better each time, and then going back till you can do it. I like that connection across the podcast.
The other thing, on purpose.
Yeah, I thought you did. The other thing you said is about being confident in being your authentic self. And I'm going to be able to give a little personal anecdote here to kind of set the stage for what I'm going to ask you. Conducting is one of the things that I wish I were better at. Now, I was a high school band director for 4 years. I took conducting classes. I took conducting with James Croft at Florida State. So you'd think I'd have some skills, but I'm so self-conscious about conducting. And I feel like I'm at my best when I'm working with my kids where I'm comfortable. And so my default as a conductor when I get scared is to beat the pattern. And so how do you get past that fear and be your authentic self as a conductor for maybe someone who's feeling self-conscious about that?
Yeah. And, there are a lot of times I feel self-conscious too, and I'm, conducting for a living. Um, I would say, instead of the default is interesting that you said to beat the pattern, because I think that takes sometimes more energy than doing less. Like I feel like our default should be, and I have that default as well. I think our default should be listening to the music and doing a little bit less and letting the players take a little bit more ownership. And, particularly with working with ensembles that are not our own, just listening to see what they're giving in order to start that conversation, that nonverbal communication between what they're playing and what we're shaping. Sometimes, when nerves kick in, the ears go away. And so in opening the ears to shape what they're doing. In general, less is more.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson because, my first day of conducting class, it was trace the pattern with your baton until you can do it without thinking, right? That's how many of us started. And so that becomes our safe place. But Definitely. You're right. It is less is more, and I consciously tell myself to do that. So that's really good advice. At least I think it is.
Yes. And, I there are a lot of times where I need to take my own advice.
Sure.
My predecessor who was here at Penn State for so long before I was here said, sometimes the conductor can be the greatest impediment to the music. And that really resonated with me because, sometimes we step off the podium and move around and we force players to listen to each other and connect with one another. And it's gorgeous. And our job is to try to figure out how to move with them without micromanaging them, guide them without micromanaging.
Yeah. I think I got the best lesson for that when I came back to this job, came back to conducting, and I was dealing with fourth graders and they're 9 years old. And you can't get up there and beat a pattern. You start them and you walk around the room and you realize that they don't really need you. and that's liberating because they need you in different ways than keeping time. You're not just a metronome.
Right. Precisely.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Anne Molesky, and I'm the host of the Anna Krusik Podcast, another podcast in the Muted Network. It's my mission to help music teachers be more purposeful, sequential, and joyful in each and everything they do as teacher musicians. Join me every Thursday as I share tips, tricks, and meaningful conversations with other music teachers about how to make the general music classroom more intentional and impactful for both you and your students.
Tonya, I've really enjoyed our conversation so far. Would it be all right if we move on to the final questions?
Certainly.
These are the big philosophical questions that I ask of all guests, and just answer them in your own way, from your own perspective. And the first of these is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I think competition that is internal can be, with oneself, can be healthy. Kind of going back to the idea of, I would like to be better than I was yesterday. I'd like to know a little bit more than I did yesterday, even if it's just a little, as opposed to external. Oh, I want to be better than this other person. I think that's when it becomes a little bit problematic. Comparison is the thief of joy. But we can make ourselves a little bit better every day.
All right, Tonya, a lot of people in our profession take great pride in working very hard. How have you found a work-life balance in your career?
Well, I don't really think I'm there yet, but I'm definitely making concerted efforts. Uh, One is with exercise. I find that if I exercise frequently, everything in my life is better. Ironically, I can be extremely exhausted, yet do a 30-minute run and it gives me more energy. I sleep better. You'll eat better. So exercise, and for me, that's usually having some sort of challenge. I don't do well with just regular exercise for health. I have to train for a triathlon or train for a half marathon or do this 8-week program, and that's what keeps me motivated. Lately, I've been trying to cook, and not necessarily cook because I really want food that tastes good. Cook because I just want the habit of, doing something good for myself and for my family. And so it's never anything fancy. It's just the routine of it that helps me to have a little bit more of a balance. I read quite a bit as well. And I like to write. Calligraphy, actually, to be exact. I like to practice my calligraphy just because it's fun and it's quiet, and you cannot do it fast. It's an exercise that you must do slowly. And so that helps kind of clear my mind.
It's interesting. That's a sort of an artistic quality from your mom, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And Mark, I had someone tell me, I hate this phrase work-life balance because it assumes that there is work and then there's life.
Right. Yes. That's come up on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think we're all working to just find some way to make 24 hours in a day feel like we're in control of them.
Yeah. I think the way I think about it is everyone has a different idea of what it means to be balanced. And one person's idea of balance isn't necessarily someone else's. Because when I was 27 and a second-year band director, I enjoyed the long hours. I didn't have a relationship. I didn't have a family. But now that I'm nearly 50 and 2 kids and a wife and a house and, all the things that go with it, I like my family time. And so I just think it's a perspective thing.
Certainly. And it changes, it changes at different times of the year, right? Sometimes you have a week that feels like a really long year, and that can be balanced out by a week of a little bit more rest and repose. And so, I don't know anyone who's found the perfect recipe for making every day feel 100% balanced, but it's something to work towards every day, certainly.
Yeah. The other thing you said, I'm curious because you mentioned that you were a track coach at Chamblee, and then you mentioned that you like to run. So running is something that you have always done? Is that?
Actually, yes. When I was in high school, I was on the track team and the cross country team. And then when I went to college, I kept running. I coached track student teaching on the Navajo Reservation. And for 2 years, my first 2 years at Chamblee, my older brother is a runner, and he went to Berry College on a running scholarship. And when I lived in Atlanta and taught high school there, we did Brother Sister Wednesday. And every Wednesday, my brother and I would do something together. And usually it was running or exercise. And then we'd do races together. So he'd call me and he'd say, Tonya, there's this race this Saturday. You want to do it with me? And I'd say, sure. And then the next week would go by and say, hey, Eric, there's a 10K coming up. Want to do that together? And I'd say, sure. And so now that I live in Pennsylvania, and honestly, there's too much snow to run. It's too cold to run here. But since I moved away and I don't have him kind of pushing me anymore, I've done a lot less running.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I know that there are a lot of band directors and musicians who run a lot. And I'm just wondering about the connection between, music and running, and if it's a quiet time for you or if it's what that does for you mentally as a musician.
I think it's a release.
Mm-hmm.
I always run to music, and it's almost never band music.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, it's just a time to think about something else or to think about nothing. And I think that repetitive action of foot on the pavement, there's something about that repetition that maybe resonates with us band directors?
All right, Tonya, this is a gigantic question, but answer it sort of from your perspective. But what are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
Well, on the, short answer is just having band at all and being able to play together. No, but, we talked a lot about representation. We talked a lot about inclusivity and how to bridge the gap. And music education, band, everything that we do is a reflection of our society. So that's, as things change, it will of course be reflected in band. And I think a lot of actions are being taken to increase our representation now in all facets of what we do in our field. There are some things that have come out, some challenges that have come out of COVID that I think have allowed us to kind of strengthen and sharpen our tools that hopefully we continue to do. I know that I will continue to use some tools that I didn't use as much before. We've been forced to increase our use of technology. And I know for many, that's been kind of on the forefront of making teaching a lot more efficient. But I think that will find that it's speeding up maybe more now as a result of having to be more proficient in the past few months. The same goes for networking and collaboration. With being on a computer, I think it was easy to have guests. It was easy to collaborate. It was easy to say, hey, will you come spend time with my group for 30 minutes, an hour on a screen, where in person, just the travel time alone, or maybe an honorarium for travel, or funds in whatever school you're in might make that a little bit more difficult. And so I know you asked what are some challenges, but I think there's a major challenge this year with the name of COVID that has allowed us to overcome some obstacles that hopefully we can continue to build on when it's gone.
No doubt. I think that this year has forced us to reflect and force us to adapt in a lot of ways. I know that I've done a lot of reflecting on my teaching over the last year, and I think I'm better for it. And I think a lot of people would agree.
Oh yeah. It's allowed us to focus more on the process, just to slow down and think, what is meaningful? What is purposeful? Why are we doing this? And how does that purpose, how is that purpose reflected in our day-to-day instruction? So it's meaningful every day for students.
Okay. So Tonya, I have just invented a time machine, and I'm going to take you back to the afternoon of your high school graduation. What are you going to tell yourself?
Oh boy. Don't try to be perfect at everything, Tonya. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't expect it all to happen right away. Edit this out if I'm not allowed to say this. There's this book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up. And I love this book as it's helping me to just relax. That I had a friend who over the break, would just send a text that said, unclench your jaw, take a deep breath, lower your shoulders. And each time I needed it, each time I thought, wow, what am I even doing right now that's making my shoulders creep up? And I think I just always have in the back of my mind, I need to be doing something more. I need to be doing something else. I need to be working. And so the advice I give to myself is, learn how to, we talked about this earlier. What is balance? Learn how to try to find balance, and also that it's okay. That it's okay. I think so much of my early life and early career, I thought that I must be working all the time, or else I'm not working hard enough. I need to be staying up, till 2 a.m. doing work and planning, or else I'm not going to be prepared enough. And I think there are a lot of days where that is the case, but most of the time it's not. So I think I would just tell myself, don't be hard on yourself. And when you make mistakes, it doesn't mean that you're a garbage person. Just learn from the mistake and move on.
Okay. So Tonya, I asked this question to try to get at the piece that has the most value to you, not necessarily a political answer, the one that's your favorite. But if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you'd want to conduct or perform?
Oh, this is a hard question. I feel like, the answer to this will probably change every year of my life. I hope that my final piece is one where I um, can make what I feel is a difference in the world, whether that be in the subject matter or the program notes or the transcendence of the music or the location or the composer that I'm championing at the time or a certain audience. I plan on being in my field for a very long time, and so I do think the answer will change. Um, I don't think I have a great answer to that now. I know that if I had to pick one piece to conduct tomorrow, and if that happened to be my last rehearsal or my last time conducting, I'd be okay with that. And that's O Magnum Mysterium. Um, I every time I play the piece, conduct the piece, hear the piece, just I get chills and the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. And I have felt that way from the first time that I heard the piece and has never ever changed. No amount of time spent with the piece in any capacity as a performer or as a conductor or as a listener has changed the visceral feeling in my body of the piece.
All right, Tonya, how can people get in touch with you?
Ooh, email is wonderful. Um, I have what I think is an easy email address, T Mitchell Spradlin, with everything pronounced exactly how you would think it's pronounced at psu.edu. I've had a couple people reach out to me on social media. I am not big on social media, but I will try to find and return a message.
Excellent. Tonya, I really appreciate your time, and I want to thank you for joining me on the show.
Oh, wonderful. And this is such an honor and a privilege to get to speak with you, Mark, and share with you and get to know more about you as well. So thank you so much for having me on.